Right behind me is my fish tank, and pretty much all the plants inside are beginning to melt and disintegrate away. Now, today I'm going to be going through what melt is and what causes it, what I did to cause this to happen to my plants, and what I did to hopefully fix it. Just so if this happens to you, maybe you can use this video to relate or figure out what's going on. Anyways, let's get into it. So melt is a process that a lot of aquatic plants go through where they sort of kill off older leaves to make it so they can better survive in a new, different, possibly more harsh environment. When aquatic plants are put into a new environment, they have to adjust to things like new temperature, new pH, in marine ecosystems, new salinity, and nutrient densities as well. And this process can be pretty stressful on the plant. So it'll basically shift all the resources away from keeping its leaves alive to creating new enzymes and proteins to make it so it can live in this new environment. Oftentimes it's a lack of nutrients or too high a pH if that's a problem. A lot of plants need CO2, and a lower pH generally means that there's more CO2 in the water. So a lot of advisors and resources online will tell you to test all that stuff beforehand. And that was pretty much what the problem with my tank was. You can't see it now, but in an earlier draft of this video that I made, the water was completely yellow. And that's because I put an entire bottle of iron substrate nutrients in here. And it turned the water yellow because of how high a concentration it was. I did that with the two other nutrients as well, but they aren't colored, so you couldn't see it in the water. But it was looking pretty bad. It looked like a toxic waste dump. I'm pretty sure if the water spilled, go right down to the bottom floor of my house. Just not good. An overabundance of nutrients like that can be really bad for the plant, just because it doesn't have all the nutrients that it needs to synthesize photosynthesis and get all the processes done. So it just sort of gets stunted. A lot of times when there's too many heavy metal ions or ions like iron, that can cause problems in pathways too, making it so it can't function at all. But basically to solve that problem, I just did a complete water cycle. And you can see now the water is pretty much clear, which is really good. On top of that, I never installed or went through the process of making a biological filter. Now, biological filter is basically all the helpful, good bacteria in your tank that makes it so all the nutrients get broken down and all the waste products get dealt with properly. Oftentimes, you can find a lot of tanks that'll have a live filter or a natural filter or biological filter in the filter on top, which my filter up here is just a normal one, and it just runs off of these pouches that are filled with carbon substrate. So I don't have an organic filter that way. It's more of just sort of a mechanical one that just separates all the bad stuff out and all the bad bacteria. So I basically had a tank with no organic filter at all, which is a problem because stuff like nitrates and ammonia can build up, and basically in even some of these nutrients that can build up if you don't have a live filter. So to solve that, I dumped an entire thing of live nitrifying bacteria, which I'll put a zoom in on that here. This can basically jumpstart in your tank. It can naturally happen over time, but it happens quicker with plants and all that other stuff. And I didn't really want to wait a super long time, and I'd already put my plants in there too, so that sort of caused a problem. Shortly before I put that in too, this was after the water change, the water became super milky white, really cloudy. I'll see if I have a picture of that. But that was a problem caused by not breaking down the nutrients that were in the water and byproducts of the plant's photosynthesis, which was sort of nice to get rid of because that didn't look super nice. And it went from basically toxic waste yellow to cloudy milky white, which did not look good. It made it so you couldn't really enjoy the tank. But the biggest problem that I ran into is there's no carbon in the tank. I got this small little bottle of aquatic carbon and put it in there, but apparently that stuff doesn't really work well according to more further research. And carbon is really important for plants. If you think about photosynthesis, the most important aspect is that it's turning carbon dioxide, basically carbon in the air, to sugars that the plants can use. And if it doesn't have that carbon dioxide or carbon in general, it can't really do that, so the plants can't feed themselves or build more mass. And the aquatic carbon wasn't doing it, and compared to oxygen, which you can disturb the top of the water to get a lot of dissolution in, or you can put an air bubbler like the one behind me in, it'll sort of force it more in. Carbon dioxide doesn't really have like an amazing way to get in naturally. Fish produce carbon dioxide respirating, so do plants a little bit, but it's not enough to sustain the life for all these plants. And there really isn't a great solution that isn't super pricey or techy. There's small things that you can put in the tank that'll pump carbon dioxide in, but for a big tank like this one's 50 gallons, that isn't super efficient. So what I ended up having to do is get a full CO2 system. It's surprisingly easy to set up. It's pretty hassle-free if you get everything set up. But I'll walk you through that right now. So the best thing about a whole CO2 system like the one I have here is that you have a lot more control, and it's a lot more sort of cost-effective and manageable. With the small tanks, you're only getting about 8 to 12 ounces of carbon dioxide, which, depending on how much you're pumping in, isn't going to last a super large amount of time. It, of course, depends on how many plants you have, but you're pretty much set with those small canisters, and the refills are pretty expensive, and a lot of supply stores don't let you refill them at all. So you're just building up $60 bills every single month, which really add up. A whole tank system like this one only costs about $6 a month to run, which is not very high for pets. Of course, there's feeding and other stuff on top of that, but extra $60 is a lot. That's $720 a year, which that's pretty much the cost of my entire setup so far. That's a little bit ridiculous, but the whole setup that I have right here was only about $200 total, not counting the tank. But basically, the refills on the tank are about $30 once you have the tank, and a tank like this is going to last me about 6 months. So what is that, $5 a month plus the fees on top of it, which this stuff resells too, so if you ever get out of the hobby, you can get your money back. But let's start walking through it. Firstly, pretty much most important part, carbon dioxide. Get this big tank right here. This is a 5-pound carbon dioxide tank. You can get these at welding supply stores. They use it as a neutral gas. Not super expensive. Tank was $90, refill $30, so $120 base, and then $30 every time after that. Not super bad at all. Going in there, I did get some weird looks because it's you're going to a welding supply store to get stuff for a fish tank. They didn't really understand what I was trying to do. Pretty sure they thought I was building a bomb, but I guess when they see me come back to refill it and it's not exploded, they'll believe that it is for a fish tank. But this basically provides all the gas that you need. Unfortunately, you do need compressed gas, so you're going to have to get refills, but every 6 months is not bad at all. And on and off, generally pretty reusable, not super expensive, and that's basically where you get the gas from. Now, for the next part, this thing right here. This is the CO2 regulator. This is basically the most expensive part, and this was the biggest problem to get. This is a CO2 ART regulator, which is pretty much the best one you can get from research I've done. It has pretty much everything you need built into it. You can get a whole little kit, so you don't got to worry about getting the wrong things or anything like that. Basically, this gets the CO2 from the tank, sees how much is in there, that's this dial right here, how much is being pumped out right here, and it measures in PSI, so you basically know how much is going into your tank, how much is going out, and it's really easy to sort of control too. This knob right here controls how much CO2 is going into the tank, so if I crank it like this, a lot more is coming in. If I crank it like this, a lot less is coming in. Just very easy to control and manage. It comes with a built-in solenoid, which is this part right here. It's sort of a power bank that controls whether or not that it's on or off. It just runs off a DC power adapter. It runs over here. Basically, compared to a traditional infuser or diffuser carbon dioxide thing, having the solenoid makes it so you can turn it on and off with power and more importantly, regulate when it's on or off so you can control it with your lights. If you look, this cord is built into this sort of DC timer adapter thing. Works pretty well. Basically just makes it so I can schedule when the CO2 comes on with the light, so CO2 isn't pumping into the tank when the light is off, and it gives the plants and eventually fish a dark period so they can rest, recuperate, do photosynthesis, basically just have the dark time that they need. I have it currently set for about 14 hours of the day, and it starts 30 minutes before the lights turn on and turn off about an hour before, something like that. I forget how it works, but basically there's a period before when the tank is being pumped with CO2 before the lights actually come on, and a time before the lights turn off where CO2 isn't pumping, basically to let the plants take all the extra CO2 out of the water. The reason that a timer like this is important basically makes it so you don't have to watch it and unplug it or turn it on or off every single day. As you're pumping CO2 into the tank, CO2 will mix with some of the water compounds and turn into HCO3, which I think is carboxylic acid. Yeah, it's the same thing that drives ocean acidification, but in your tank it'll just skyrocket the pH super quick, and that's not good for plants, animals, or anything. Your plants can sort of offset it, but you're still going to be lowering the pH consistently. But as much as the plants can remove the CO2, less pH change. And when the lights are off, the plants can't really do photosynthesis. They aren't taking it out. So in dark times, when it's just getting pumped with CO2, that would just skyrocket the pH down, which is not good. So a solenoid with a timer like that is really important. And that's why the CO2 art is really nice, because it just comes with it. You have to get the timer separate, but you can get these pretty much everywhere. It's the same timer you use on like a Christmas tree or something like that. Pretty easy to set up. Most lights, which I'll show you the one after, have built-in light settings too, so you don't even have to worry about it. I'm eventually going to be switching the light to one of these too, just because I'm not sure if during a power outage it'll remember the settings once it's off. So that could cause problems where it's light 24/7 if I'm gone for a period of time. And that's not super nice. Anyways, moving on to the next part. So this right here is the bubble counter. This basically can help show you how much carbon dioxide in forms of bubbles is going into your tank. This gauge is helpful because it shows you how much is being pumped through, but the bubble counter is really just an easier way to do it. A lot of guides online will tell you to keep it between 1 to 3 bubbles a second. I had it for 3 bubbles a second for about a full day with the plants and lights on, and it shot my pH down by half a point. So 3 bubbles seems like it's too much, so I switched to 1 bubble. But this is just an easy way to tell basically how much is going in and out. It's an on and off switch here too, so you can just cut off the flow if you really need to. See, it works like that. But following the bubble counter, it goes into this cord here, which is what pumps it into the tank. Let's go up there. I'll show you what that looks like. See you there. So you can see it right behind me. I'll zoom into that little bar back there. The tan one is where the CO2 line goes. It goes all the way from the tank up and around, down into the tank, into the diffuser. Now, the CO2 diffuser has to be slightly different than your regular air stone, like the one I have right over there. It has to be a lot more porous, smaller holes, basically getting the bubble size as small as possible. Carbon dioxide does not diffuse into water nearly as well as oxygen, so you need to get as much surface area as possible so you can get the most diffusion action as possible. And smaller bubbles do that. Basically, the smaller something is, in terms of regular volume, the more surface area it has. And you can see this problem in a lot of animals. Bigger animals have problems losing heat. Smaller animals have problems keeping heat in. It's all about surface area and diffusion. But in terms of CO2, more surface area means more diffusion. So the smaller bubbles you can get into more of them, more surface area and more diffusion. So a special ceramic diffuser like that is microscopic holes. We'll see if I can't get a good picture of the bubbles coming out. they're so small you can hardly see them. And that's perfect for CO2. It needs more diffusion and more CO2 in the water for the plants. Right now it's at a little bit of an angle, which is a problem, but easy to fix. I need to get clamps anyways to secure the water line at the back, possibly move it around a little bit to make it look a little bit better. But yeah, that's pretty much the CO2 system, except for one thing. So this right up here is the CO2 basically measuring device. It's a little thing in there that measures the pH, and from that you can see how much CO2 there is in the water. There's a little water chamber with gas in there. It's just air from outside with fluid in there that detects the pH. That basically tells me a general idea what the pH is. I still have to use the regular indicator fluid, which where's an example somewhere. Let me just grab one. Yeah. I still have to use a test kit like this one with tubes that you just measure how much pH is in the water. Do that every single day still. But other than that, the CO2 system for my tank is going pretty well. No hitches. The light is right on top here. It's a Higger light, which is considered pretty well. Shines multiple different colors, so the plants are getting all the different sort of rays of photosynthesis, highest production possible. But yeah, light system is really important, makes it so plants are getting light when they need it, so make sure to pick out a good brand so it doesn't just malfunction and cause problems. Basically stops the pH spike from happening. Your pH is going to slowly go down with CO2. There's nothing you can do to stop that. Regular water changes, like I do probably 10 gallons a week now, does help solve it, make it so it goes back up, keeps a good balance. But a light can help sort of prevent it and slow it down a little bit more, and proper usage of CO2. But yeah, that's the whole CO2 system. There was one other thing that I had to install because I got CO2, that being a air stone, basically a stone that just pumps air into the tank. I'll show that right now too. So we're gonna switch over to this side of me. Welcome to the other side. I missed you guys. Anyways, this is my air stone. Similar to the CO2 one, it's basically a rock. This is actually a rock with holes drilled in it, so bubbles will form and sort of shoot up. I have a little compressor down here. I'll show that. Just like an air compressor you'd have for your car or tires or anything like that. Just pumps air through the cord that I have running back there. This one has two holes that pump air out, so I just took a T-bend, put both cords in there. Basically the reverse of what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to split one connection into two, but I'm using it to put two connections into one. That's an interesting tip I'll learn from one of the forums. But basically with this, I can control how much air I want to pump into the tank. I can do like a super tiny bit, which is a couple bubbles, or I can make it go crazy. It's really helpful because if you're looking at your fish or whatever, you don't want to see all these bubbles. Just turn it down a little bit for the time being. I don't have any fish in there yet. I do have a snail, Mr. Clean, but he doesn't need a super ton of oxygen. So for now, keeping it at a low level just to keep the air in the tank moving. At least from what I understand, the more oxygen in the tank, the more that pushes CO2 out, and the same in reverse. So you do sort of need to keep pumping it in to keep it balanced. The water being pushed around and disturbed by the filter up there does add some amount of oxygen to the tank, but oxygen just isn't something you want to mess with because that can kill your fish pretty quickly. Fish can live in completely still water for like a day and a half, but why would you want to do that to them? They're your friends. You want to make sure they're happy and healthy. So an air stone like this is just something to keep in mind to make sure that they're all safe and happy. You can get them for different decibels. With the air stone, it doesn't really matter how super productive they are or how close to the maximum you are, as long as you're getting enough oxygen in there, which if you have something like this with plants, you're pumping it 100% all the time, you shouldn't really have that many problems. But yeah, that's pretty much all the problems that I fixed to get rid of the plant melt. My plants are beginning to come back now, especially after the carbon dioxide was added. It's a slow process because they do start out as completely translucent, but the lack of CO2 actually caused another problem that we're going to talk about that being blackbeard algae. So I'm going to move the camera back so it's not so claustrophobic, and then we'll talk about it. Yeah, so the current problem I'm facing is a really big blackbeard algae crisis. I say crisis, it's more of a nuisance, but basically because I pumped way too many nutrients in the water and didn't have carbon dioxide, the algae can basically use all these nutrients and bloom. As you can see, there's little black specks all along the bottom of the tank, and that would have kept growing if I didn't get the CO2 in there. Right now it seems like they've stopped a little bit, or at least are just subsiding and not super multiplying because the plants are starting to use it, but it doesn't look too great, and it can be a problem for your filter. I did get really lucky though. I checked my tank 2 days ago, right when I saw the bloom happen. There's a bladder snail going all over and starting to clean. I just saw one, so his name is Mr. Clean for now. But yeah, he'll naturally get rid of a lot of blackbeard algae, especially that it stopped growing. Does cause the problem of, could be a population bloom of them, have a couple hundred of them, but as long as algae's dealt with now and won't keep growing, he shouldn't get too many. And like little snail pets are pretty nice, but that's sort of the problem with having plants, nutrients, and no CO2. A lot of extra stuff can grow in there that is not super nice. Algae is sort of the biggest one, but some other bacteria can do it too. So if you're going to do a planted tank, you really need to make sure that you use CO2. There's like homemade remedies that people have online where you're taking like soda bottle with yeast. I've seen people talk about that overflowing in the tank, killing everything. And I mean, like the price point to get into the CO2 art and CO2 infusion stuff wasn't super bad, assuming you're buying like a $700 tank setup. And I mean, it's easy and rechargeable too, so it's not super bad. The main reason why I ran into all these problems is just because I wasn't prepared. Getting plants was sort of on a whim. I just saw them and I got them, and I just asked the pet store people what I needed. I didn't know that you need CO2 or anything like that. I didn't really think about it, even though I knew that plants needed CO2, but that's just how it goes sometimes, and sort of got to roll with the punches. I did do some research, and I was going on unofficial sources, so I just saw a lot of people arguing. Airstone, I didn't originally get when I got the tank because I saw a thread where two people were arguing, and one guy was just basically like, if you need an airstone, why don't lakes have airstones? Point me to the big airstone in lakes. It's just like, you know what? He's making some sense here. I don't need an airstone. He's right. And then I looked at other sources, and it's just like, there's no reason not to get an airstone. It can only help. It's just like, oh, I don't know why that guy said that. Same thing with the nutrients. I didn't think the nutrients dumping them all in were a problem because I saw posts on these forums where people are like, this stuff is like water. I dump entire bottles in it one time and leave it. It's just like, okay, sure. I believe you. Fish lover like 12. You know your stuff. You have 20,000 posts on this forum. That didn't work out. All the official guides and books and stuff that I've read now all have pretty like solid information. So just go off of those. Don't go off of people's like lived experience. Unless someone you know in real life, don't go off it. I saw people online talking about like water level differences, which I do have a small one. It's about 1/8 of an inch. But online people were saying like, if you have 1/8 of an inch water difference, your tank will explode. And you don't want the death of your fishes on your hands. I was so worried about that. I got wedges. I made it as perfect as possible. And then I asked like actual people that do it, and it's like, no, it's not going to be a like big problem. Like these tanks are like pressure built for a lot more than what they have. It's not going to explode because of a small difference. But basically all my problems were caused because I was getting bad information. So if you do get a tank, make sure you go by official sources, not weirdos on forums who have nothing better to do. Because if they had anything better to do, they'd probably be writing a fish book with actual information. But yeah, everything's looking good with the tank so far now. Everything's in order. Everything's looking way better. And once the plant melt problem is 100% dealt with, I will be getting fish finally. I'll post a video about that too. Can't wait to get them. Really super excited. I was looking at the website too, and it's like they got these flower horn cichlids, which are like super aggressive but fun looking. Can't have anything in the tank with them though, because they'll basically kill themselves. But maybe I'll get a second smaller tank if I ever get the money. But yeah, hopefully everything keeps going well. And if you get a fish tank, everything goes well for you too. Sorry that this video is a little bit different. Guess should be called Max Indoors now. But this is like animals technically, so I say it counts. Let me know if I can help with anything in terms of tank problems, if anyone actually sees this video. Feel free to comment below or just message me. But yeah, stay tuned to see the fish introduction. Post a little clip of my snail, Mr. Clean, cleaning off my little shark statue. Thanks for watching.